Hello and welcome to Women of Wayland podcast, where we bring you stories of extraordinary women from a small town in Massachusetts. These stories would probably go unnoticed if you blinked too fast. But if you spare a minute, you will find that our neighborhood women, through their stories, can connect and inspire people around the world. Around midnight, as I was tossing and turning in my bed, I felt like someone's eyes were on me. I thought I was just imagining or dreaming it, and I fell back asleep. In a state of strange, sleepy consciousness, I felt someone's breath on my face. I was about to scream as a reflex, but he put his hands on my mouth and signaled me to keep quiet. How many of you have heard of the word grooming or used it in a negative connotation? I think very few of us know that the word has a very deep and serious meaning. At least I didn't know that. I will explain this at the end of the story, but you should know that this is a story that needs to be told and heard, not only because it sheds light on a relatively less explored topic, but also because it means closure for someone. Because the topic we are dealing with is sensitive in nature, I recommend listening to this episode when children are not around. And to keep the story anonymous, I'll be narrating it for you. Our guest has condensed a decade of her life in the next 30 minutes. This episode is also special because it's the first time we are telling a story anonymously. Honoring our pledge to provide free ad spots for local businesses during these difficult times, we would like to give a shout out to Waypoint Adventures from Lexington and the Trendy Girl from Weston. And we urge our listeners to continue to support their local businesses. Our first shout out is for Waypoint Adventure, envisioning life to the fullest for everyone regardless of ability. Working with parents, teachers, and social service organizations, Waypoint Adventure runs adventure education programs for youth and adults with disabilities. Of course, Waypoint programs transform the lives of kids with special needs, but lives of those quote-unquote regular or normal individuals that participate are transformed too. You can find more information about them at www.waypointadventures.org. The Trendy Girl, a style for every story. This is a fashion and accessory boutique for those who love fashion. The Trendy Girl curators search new trends regularly to bring you the latest fashion. What's more, you don't have to go to the Western Town Center to buy from them. You can do it online, and they ship to all 50 states. Go to www.thetrendyGirl.com to find out more and follow their Instagram handle at thetrendyGirlINC to check out their latest collections and even listen to the owner on Insta every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Don't forget to check them out. Now let's get started with our story. From the time I was 18 until the time I got married, the anxiety and fear of being watched and the helplessness of not being able to tell anyone about what was going on was a constant. It was 2002. I had just turned 18. I was a lean, frail, and somewhat confused country girl, studying in a big city and nurturing big dreams, albeit silently. I had no experience dating men, none. My cousin wanted me to meet him, the special guy she had been seeing. It was sort of a, approval dinner. So there I was, at dinner with my cousin and her boyfriend. It was a great sight to see her happy, giggly, and in love. In my mind, they already were a great couple. They were in their late 20s. That night, after he left, let's just call him Mr. G. So after Mr. G left, my cousin and I both jumped and danced with excitement. I know, how girly, right? We had our midnight ice cream binge and went off to bed. Life went on as usual. Until a week later, when I got a text message from an unknown number. The message contained so many adoring compliments about me. Now you have to imagine me, an 18-year-old with no experience dating whatsoever. I thought there was no way in the world this was for me. I mean, seriously. Then, another message. This time, it described me in detail. I froze. I responded, "Who is this?" The response. Another sweet message. I stopped responding. I was completely weirded out, scared of the people in the big city, not knowing who this might be and what this would lead to. I decided to focus on my homework and just ignore it. Little did I know, this would continue for an entire week. I just couldn't figure out who it was. About a week after the messages started, I was getting ready to leave for class when I heard a knock on my door. I opened the door to find Mr. G standing in the doorway, staring at me with a smirk on his face. Confused and shocked, I blurted out, "What are you doing here? How do you know where I live?" He said, "My cousin told him that I live here. I just happened to be passing by, and I thought I would just drop by." "It's okay, kiddo. Here. Just share the chocolates with your friends," he said, handing a box of chocolates to me. Meanwhile, the text from the unknown number continued, and were growing on me. I had never received such sweet compliments before, and I enjoyed the attention. The messages got more and more intimate, and I felt strangely drawn to them. And just like that, one day, the unknown person revealed himself. It was Mr. G. I was in complete shock. I felt disgusted, confused, weird, and utterly scared. What would my cousin think if she found out? In my head, I imagined what would happen if I told her. Nothing about this situation seemed right. There is no way this is going to end well, I thought. But I didn't know what to do. I felt like I was stuck in a bad dream that I could not wake up from. I implored Mr. G to stop messaging me, but he was relentless. Let's pause for a second. Before I proceed to tell you what happens next, let me describe Mr. G to you. You know the guy who graduates at the top of his class, athletic, good-looking, just can't do or say anything wrong. The guy who gets all the attention and the girls falling for him left, right, and center. Mr. G was that guy. Mr. G was someone who had never heard no for an answer. Being an introvert, I didn't know how much to oppose or how much to engage with him. So I confided in my mother. Her suggestion was to keep quiet and stay away. She belonged to a generation brought up to stay quiet. What other advice could she possibly give me? It's not your place to clear things up between them when they themselves cannot see the issue, she told me. I even told one of my friends about it, and I got the same response, to just focus on my studies and stay quiet. For the next couple of weeks, I laid low. I stopped visiting my cousin, so there was no way Mr. G would approach me. I also changed my cell number. I just wanted it to go away. But then the messages started again. Mr. G had gotten my new number from my cousin's phone. He even started mailing me gifts. So there I was, 18 years old and terrified that my family would find out. I felt that at the end of the day, they would all blame me. They would think I was distracted. They would say I must have done something to attract this guy, a guy who was dating my cousin. Family became a source of fear. Mr. G, taking advantage of the silence, thinking it to be my acceptance, continued his advances toward me. One of the biggest things he managed to do was create doubt about my cousin's love for me. He convinced me that my cousin didn't really like me. He even recorded a conversation, actually, where they were bitching about me and sent it to me as a proof. At that point, I can see in hindsight that he was extremely close to convincing me he was head over heels in love with me, and that my cousin didn't really like me. So even if I got together with him, no harm would be done in terms of relationships. You can imagine, this was getting more and more complicated very quickly. This was not what I imagined my first year of college would be like. So, as the saying goes, desperate times call for desperate measures. I decided to transfer to another college in a different city. I just wanted everything to end. After changing cities, I thought I got rid of the problem, right? Wrong. Instead, he upped his game. He started catching flights to my new city, showing up at my college and sending me gifts. He knew I would return it, and that would give him a reason to show up at my dorm. I was getting more anxious every day. Years passed like this in silence, always looking over my shoulder. Even after I finished college in 2006, his advances didn't stop. And then one day, I found out that he was engaged to my cousin. They were getting married within a year. I can't describe the relief I felt in that instant, and how I was simultaneously scared my cousin was going to live her life with this person. Still, I had zero courage to tell her everything that had happened. But in my dreams, I imagined rescuing her from the wedding, rescuing myself, and quite literally breaking Mr. G's bones. Above all, I was relieved this nightmare that had continued for 4 long years was finally coming to an end. I didn't hear from Mr. G or my cousin for a few months leading up to the wedding, so I assumed it was in the best interest that I stay away and not attend the wedding. It was too late for me to tell her anyways, and I thought Mr. G must have, realized his problem. I didn't hear from him for the next year. No texts, no packages, no random appearances at places I frequented, nothing. It really was over. Then one day, my grandmother asked me and my mom to come with her to a dear friend's anniversary party. Her friend lived in the same city as my cousin, and you guessed it. She wanted to stay with my cousin, and she hadn't seen her for a long time. Oh, our grandmas. I was going to have to stay with my cousin. As my grandmother made this request, I took a deep breath. I knew what this meant. I spoke to my mother, but she did not see any reason to worry since all 3 of us were going to be there. But I wasn't feeling it. I ignored my gut and booked my tickets. When we finally arrived at my cousin's place, I felt relieved Mr. G was not home. I consoled myself saying he would not do anything as he's now happily settled with my cousin and I'm needlessly worrying. Then later that night, Mr. G came home for dinner and sat cheerfully at the table, serving my mom and grandmother at the table. He completely ignored me. I thought he was either trying to maintain distance, trying to draw attention, or even letting me know that he hated me for being there, or he just didn't care. I went to bed early that night and let everyone indulge in conversation and laughter. Night 1 went well. Day 2 was even better with Mr. G nowhere in sight. Then on the last day of the trip, my grandma wanted to spend some quality time with her friend, so she asked me to drop her and my mom at her friend's place. She suggested I come back to my cousin's place to spend the last night of the trip there, and then take an early morning flight back. I thought, yeah, sure. I didn't see Mr. G being involved in any of this, so I was looking forward to just getting it done and getting out of there. I wouldn't ever have to see him again after that, or so I thought. We all prepared to go. I suggested we just take a cab, but Mr. G insisted he will be dropping us and there was no need for cabs. That meant he would drop mom and grandma to my grandmother's friend's place and me back home. Before I knew it, my mom and grandma had been dropped off, and I was indeed alone with him in the car. I felt uneasy, but I didn't feel scared. I was positive nothing would happen, or at least I told myself that again and again. In the car, I wasn't paying attention to the roads. Was purposefully busy on my phone, so there was absolute silence in the car. After about 20 minutes of driving, I heard the car screech to a halt. I looked up to find us in total darkness on an unknown road with no streetlights. How stupid could I be? I cursed myself for being busy with my phone. I felt a shiver run down my spine and thought this was the end. No one would know what happened to me. He then starts talking to me, asking me why I ignored him, telling me how much he loved me and that he wasn't happy in his marriage. His voice was getting louder and louder, and he was getting angrier by the second. He started screaming at me. I had to respond, but I was shell-shocked, literally shaking. I knew if I said anything against him at all, it would be the end of me. I was petrified and scared for my life. Anything could have happened in that dark alley that night. All I remember is breaking down, crying and saying sorry. My survival instincts kicked in. I gathered myself, knowing I had to get out of this situation, and I just apologized again and again for not seeing his love for me. I really still cannot describe that moment. In fact, I can barely recall it now. I do remember clearly, though, that I was praying he wouldn't rape and kill me. After he was finished saying everything he wanted, he started the car and said, "All right, let's go." As if none of this just happened. That's it? I survived to tell this tale? Well, why did he not assault me? He could have. Absolutely. And then soon enough, another thought crossed my mind. Does he truly love me? Does he actually truly love me? Or he would have done something for sure, right? Yes, I did think he loved me, because he didn't force himself on me. There you go. Stupid mind logics. He was beginning to get my confidence. This is exactly how he was used to winning people's trust. With a quantum of relief in my mind, I went to sleep that night, but that didn't last too long. Around midnight, as I was tossing and turning in my bed, I felt like someone's eyes were on me. I thought I was just imagining or dreaming it, and I fell back asleep. In a state of strange, sleepy consciousness, I felt someone's breath on my face. As if waking up from a bad dream, my body reacted, and I woke up startled. The first thing I saw was Mr. G's face hovering over mine. I was about to scream as a reflex, but he put his hands over my mouth and signaled me to keep quiet. In complete disregard to my panicked, frozen state, he proceeded to tell me how this was his last chance to see me before I left the next morning. So he was simply admiring me from a distance for the past hour. He said he was still in love with me and very unhappy in his marriage. In my shocked, sleepy, confused stupor, my brain froze, and so did my words. He crawled into my bed, under the covers, whispering how much he loved me and how my cousin was asleep in the next room and would never know a thing. He climbed on top of me and started kissing me and pushed me down with his body. My mind kept screaming for help and yelling, "No," but I lost my voice. My body gave in. The last thing I remember is staring blankly at the ceiling fan. The next morning, I was full of self-disgust and regret. I got out of there as quickly as I could. Over the next few months, he sent me emails asking for forgiveness and apologizing. I was in such pain and anguish. Again, for the gazillionth time, I just wanted this to go away. After that, I took another drastic step. I started my PhD in a different country. I came back to the news that he had filed for a divorce. He tried to convince me I wasn't the reason he was divorcing. But I wasn't buying it. I wasn't falling for anything again. I couldn't believe the situation this jerk was continuing to put me in. Can you imagine what would happen if this got out? I cried and cursed myself over and over again. What a fool I had been. The missteps I had taken as a teenage girl. These were very hard to forget and let go. But I had to find a way. Knowing the way this world mysteriously punishes victims, especially when they are women. I was a survivor. I knew that. I knew I had to keep quiet, but also find a way to move forward with a clean slate for myself. Enough was enough. A decade had gone by. I finished my PhD, started my new job, found a great guy, and got engaged. And my wedding was around the corner. I was in a happy place. I had barely scratched the surface of this topic with my fiancé. Just mentioning it as a dark episode in my life. Nothing that deserves any attention anymore. He agreed, took it exactly as that. Then one day, out of the blue, my soon-to-be husband receives a note from Mr. G. My fiancé asked me if I knew this person. My heart stopped beating. Mr. G sent a detailed 5-page PDF to my fiancé describing my alleged relationship with him and other men, basically telling him that I was quote-unquote whore and listing reasons why my fiancé shouldn't marry me. My world just had turned upside down. He had already ruined my cousin's life, now he was after mine. I was crushed. I cursed and cried at my naivete. That I had even once, for a split second, trusted him, believed, and given in to his words. Ultimately, this traumatic episode also passed. My fiancé stood by me. He was taken by surprise by the amount of time and detail Mr. G had put into the document. To what extent was this guy willing to go hurt people, he said. I haven't heard anything from Mr. G since then. I'm still happily married to the same person who endured Mr. G's final episode with me. To my cousin, years later, I apologize for not having understood what was going on and not confiding in her. For my mom, who told me not to tell anyone and mind my own business, I only have love. I don't blame her. That's what we women are told the moment we set our foot into this world. To all of you who just listened to this and are thinking she should have told her cousin directly, she should have told him to get lost, she should have filed a complaint and everything else, just know that the maturity or rationality of a teenager is no match for the expert manipulation of a groomer. Yes, groomers. And Mr. G for a groomer. It's a serious offense and also punishable. Grooming, that is, preparing and convincing young children or adults to engage in sexual acts. Much later would I even come to know of this word and realize how big this problem is in our society. How many young girls fall prey to groomers. But you know what the funny thing is? I didn't even know what I was going through. I know I'm not to be blamed, but still, sometimes I curse myself. I'm not guilty of anything, but still I feel shameful that I wasn't able to stand up for myself. But I endured. I came out stronger. I learned a lesson. And through this story, I hope many others do. How I wish it was the current me who Mr. G had to face off with. Now, as a mother of a daughter, what I can do is to not tell her to be quiet, because quiet doesn't solve the problem. Speaking up does. Sharing your stories with others does. Getting help does. There are so many organizations working to address this issue. Reach out to them. Work with them to get help for yourself or those in need. Even more important is for us women to be aware of how our daughters, sisters, nieces, and others are feeling. Be mindful if that introvert girl has been extra quiet lately.
Ask her if everything is okay. You might be the angel she needs.
I truly hope you loved listening to our first anonymous story and were able to learn something important. We will meet soon. Do not forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Till then, signing off. This is Yamini, your host, and you were listening to Women of Wayland podcast.